Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about unit tests. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, can someone change the mindset of a software engineering team that writes unit tests just to fulfill the code coverage metrics? That is a good question. So this is one of those occasions that if you are anything besides a true senior software developer and a team lead of some sort, uh, there's very lit. It's very difficult for you to change this. You can do it as a fellow coworker, but ideally you should be someone with enough authority. You don't have to be a manager per se, but you should have enough pull within the company to make people painfully aware of that your opinion matters. Let me explain that a little bit. So I am a big believer in the, like you've probably heard, carrot stick way of motivating people. And the way, at least if you've ever been here in Sweden, usually the way that the Swedes do business and management and so forth is through what we call the consensus model. And that is very heavily geared towards carrot, where basically we try to bridge differences, be diplomatic in many, many cases. Not always the case. This is very broad stroke, of course. I hope you understand that. But you're trying to always give people the benefit of the doubt, and you're constantly, even when it's very frustrating, trying to make the best of the situation. Now, the problem when you do that too much, which is sort of like the classic prejudice against socialism and things of that nature, is that where it gets to the point where it gets ridiculous, where where people who are not motivated to do a good job, they don't give a shit about anything, they're sort of exploiting and trying to game the system that is built on trust, because that is at the end of the day what it is. The opposition, or the complete reverse of this, is that you have a system that is based on that you are always treated like a criminal, and you have to prove to whatever organization that you're answering to that you're not corrupt, or that you're not like an issue, and so forth, which is the reverse, right? Now, in this scenario, you have a problem, because the problem is that you cannot effectively fix this issue by either saying that, well, I'm just going to trust my developers, because clearly they're not, they clearly don't understand that metrics or like code coverage is not the same as quality. So whether that is because they're incompetent, uninformed, etc., or just most likely lazy, which is the normal reason why people have a problem with code coverage. So like that's one area of the problem. But the other problem is that you can't just crack the whip and say that you can't scold people as a group or anything like that, and say that you're all bad at this thing. You need to like write better tests and like sort of go about it that way, because that high level of a punishment, it's easy for people to take to ignore the stick approach when it's collective, because now we're all sharing the burden, and it's all like you're not being singled out in any way. So the way that I solve this issue, it's the same way I solve laziness or unmotivated people or things like that when I deal with teams and so forth. And that is that I need to be informed enough, I need to know the code base, and I need to be a fairly decent software developer to pull this off. And then I do code reviews, and I focus extra on the unit tests. And basically I create a workflow where everybody in the team knows that, in this case I'm the tech lead, but I could also have been something else, like I could be just a fellow coworker or something like that. All that has to happen is that the people doing the sloppy work, they have to know on some primal level that if they do not do a good job, there are going to be consequences. And you cannot hide now, because you are being singled out as at an individual level. If I go as a manager and say the code coverage or like the quality is like we have all these bugs, etc., then it's the team's fault. And as I said, most people are okay with being blamed as part of a group, but they're not so okay with being singled out as an individual level. And that is what's so powerful about doing the code reviews. And I've done this many times. It really works. It works so well, where you don't even have to be mean to people. It's sort of the same thing. How do you deal with a bully? It's easy. Make them feel watched to a certain point. Because clearly just giving them personal freedom and responsibility hasn't been working out, so now you have to use the equal, like the stick and the carrot. You can't just use one or the other. You have to play it's like playing an instrument. And I've seen this many times where I have software developers who are really, really lazy. I mean, software developers are lazy, and all that I really have to do, as I said, is to make them aware of that I am watching, and then of course I have to also set certain guidelines and rules. Like there have to be something that, like an agreement or a contract or something between them, and like they're basically there has to be definitive proof that they are supposed to be doing one thing but they're not doing that thing. The reason why that is very important is because when someone continuously does not perform or doesn't actually comply with the needs of what the team is looking for, etc. For example, if you do pay attention and you see that you keep on giving feedback to a person and they simply do not care, you have to fire them. Even if they're overall a good developer or something like that. And the reason being, for the very same source of reason why in the Middle Ages public executions was such a good thing. Well, I'm not saying good thing, that's very calling it a lot, but for the government, the public executions was a very useful tool. The reason being that in those times you did not have law enforcement to the point where we have today, where you have a fairly compliant population and you had systems in place that sort of built in that people paid their tax, sort of followed the law, and like you could effectively deal with it at a low, like without escalating that much. So what did you do? Well, you had to single out someone and make an example of them so that the others would would fall in line. This is exactly what I'm telling you to do with the code coverage. And I'm not talking public executions here. I'm saying that if it gets to the point where you realize that there is actually an attitude problem here, where if you pay attention and you give constructive feedback and you sort of get people into the habit, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to build a habit. You're not trying to intimidate people. You're just trying to give honest feedback. But you have to be there to show people, all right, you wrote this test here. It's not the best thing. Maybe you could add these tests, extra. You actually really need to know what the good test looks like, and then coach people into writing those tests. And when people get into the habit of doing that, because they know that you are paying attention, you're breeding this culture. You're leading by example. And then, of course, you have to be humble as well, enough to take criticism and so forth, because together you will get stronger if you have this mindset, right? As the person who's trying to fix this is your best bet. But if you find that there are people, if you find that there is resistance, like where people really, like, they don't give a fuck because they're for some reason able to ignore the fact that you are paying attention, then you have to scare them. And the best way to scare a person in a job or something like that is to fire somebody over the fact that they are not complying with the goals of the company. There is nothing more undermining than allowing inefficiency and incompetence and laziness and unwillingness to do a good job at a workplace. It rots everything, and you cannot have that in a high-functioning team. So what I want you to take away from this is that if you want to fix the fact that people are just writing unit tests for the code coverage metrics, you have to put the person who knows what a quality test looks like into the development process and make sure that they review the code that is going through the pipeline. Because if things are going through and they're not writing good tests, then this is a systematic problem. Then the people, either they're like the comments are being ignored or they're not being added in the first place. So you need a quality type of person to be involved and start getting some of that personal accountability into the mix, so that people feel like, well, here I got a few comments on my unit testing, maybe I should improve that. And that gives you an insight into, are they actually going to do better if you just make sure that the process becomes a little bit more qualitative, or are they going to still try to like sort of circumvent, like do they try to rise to the occasion and do better, or are they going to try to get around the problem or ignore you in some fashion? If that is the case, take out full stick and fire the least competent person. And then, I like to, don't make a spectacle out of it. Just fire them and say that unfortunately we couldn't keep this so and so, because we are trying to go for more qualitative work process here, and we can't really sustain over time this level of negligence when it comes to our unit testing and bugs and so forth and so forth. And I can promise you, my friend, that is going to send the message. That's going to that speaks directly to the survival instinct and reptile brain of a lot of people. Have a great day.